Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Inferno cast. This is episode 056. I am Fox, host of the podcast and of YouTube's Inferno Fox Gaming channel. Inferno Fox Gaming has content regarding RPGs, Nintendo, and retro gaming. The Inferno cast here is on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. And while we're here, friendly reminder to moderate video game playing, touch grass, and help your partner, parents, or roommates around the house. Got a fun topic here today that's topical to the time of the year. But before we get into that, let me introduce our fantastic cast and crew. We have Jamie Owls 87. She is my partner and partner in crime. Jamie Owls, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
And we're happy to have you here as well. We also have Jason the 13th of the YouTube channel, Jason the 13th. Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Not a problem.
We also have joining us Hillbilly Hardicus. He is a good friend and our resident hill slut. Hillbilly, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, and thanks for having me.
We also have here the venerable Stormrosesky of the Twitch and YouTube channels of Stormrosesky. Storm, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And last and certainly not least, we have Astrimedes, developer and co-owner of Second Place Games. And Astrimedes, thank you so much for joining as well.
Happy to be here making stuff up with you today.
Yes. And of course, a shout out to our missing member, Simbu Darkfang. He is not able to make it tonight, but he is the host of the live streaming video games gameplay itself on the Scurryface channel via Twitch. Make sure you catch that on Sunday nights. Simbu does a really good job of sort of announcing and discussing things when he is not getting interruptions during live gameplay. But make sure you check it out. It really is a lot of fun, and make sure you support him there. But before we get into our main topic, which is a world without Super Mario Brothers, we're going to ask our crew here, what game to still come out this year are you looking forward to the most? And I'm going to start us off with, I'll probably say, I was torn between the new Zelda game, Echoes of Wisdom, or the Dragon Quest III remake. I'm probably going to go Dragon Quest III remake because it's like the best of two worlds. The whole Dragon Quest JRPG goodness with the Team Asano 3D aesthetic. I'm really looking forward to that. I've got a collector's edition coming, which of course I'm not going to open or touch or anything because I'm an idiot and I just like to hold on to them and collect them. But yeah, I really looking forward to playing that remake. Let me ask Jamie Owls, what game to still come out this year are you looking forward to the most?
Uh, I don't know. I there's a lot that I am looking forward to, but I would probably have to pick the most recent one that's going to be coming soon, and it's the Epic Mickey.
Oh, nice.
And I pre-order that for the PlayStation 5 because I think that's going to look a lot better on that system. So that would be my pick. And if I can say my second most look forward game will probably be the Life is Strange, um, the uh the sequel to the first one. So
Kind of surprised that sequel isn't your most looking forward to, how much you enjoyed the first Life is Strange.
yeah, I don't know. It's hard to pick because I played Epic Mickey when it first came out on the Wii, like almost now 12 years ago. So I think it'd be really fun to start playing that again because we don't even have, well, we have a Wii system, but we don't have it hooked up. And I think I still own the game, but yeah, it's been a very long time. So I'm looking forward to play that again. That'd be fun.
Cool. Jason the 13th, how about you? And I know you're going to be in trouble because there's no Pokemon game coming out by the end of the year,
No,
right?
but I do have two other ones other than the Zelda one because first I'm like, okay, I know Zelda's coming out. Are my other two picks coming out? And I had to Google them real quick. So the one that I'm probably more excited for it's kind of a cheat. Its release date is literally December 31st. And that is the sequel to the Phantom Brave RPG. That one's going to be awesome.
Oh, nice. I actually think the release date hasn't been officially announced. It's just they say 2024, and so they always put
Well,
it like
according to the certain websites, I could pre-order it with the release date of December 31st.
that's a placeholder.
It probably is.
Yeah,
But
whenever they give a placeholder of the last day of the year, not a
yeah,
placeholder, a release
yeah,
date.
usually it doesn't hit that day. So the other one that does actually come out, that'll be perfectly in time for Christmas, is the Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Arcade
Yes.
Collection. So I'm very excited for that one on top of the Zelda, of course. So,
Oh, nice. Good picks there, my friend. Good
hmm
thing, and we're lucky because in the States here, we got the physical game on the cart if you have the Switch. The Europeans don't have that. It's a code in the
Ooh,
box.
wow.
I don't know why for the Switch, and it's a Switch only in Europe only. Don't know
Hmm.
why, but hey, at least and failing that, if they had a code in the box here for the States, well, I'm going to cancel my Switch one, and I'd get the PS4 copy. So,
Yeah.
Hardicus, how about you? Any what game to still release by the end of the year are you looking forward to the most?
Oh, see, I see. You changed it at the last second to be released. My
Hey.
most anticipated game just came out, and that's
Ooh.
The War Within for World of Warcraft. Uh,
Hmm.
Barring that, I guess probably the Capcom Fighting Collection with the the Marvel's Capcom 2. That just one of my favorite games of all time.
Nice. Yeah, you can't go wrong with that, and that way you can kick my butt online. And I know you're looking forward to
Right?
that. Smash
But
Brothers
I'm
Revenge.
definitely not looking forward to that. Absolutely not looking forward to that.
And it's not like we're gonna live stream any of that. It's it,
Oh,
it, it's it's not like that's gonna, be a thing.
you really want proof of that?
Mhm.
Uh
Yes.
yeah. It's only
Okay.
it's only fair.
We need to get
Okay.
in. We need to definitely make this happen because I will jump in and play against you guys.
Right,
Me
we'll have to do a
too.
game night too.
We would do a thing where like you and I would connect on Zoom, and then I would share my screen through Zoom so we could hear your commentary through the thing and live stream through my Switch or however I'm gonna want to do this in case we can't get you out here in good old Chicagoland. As they say in Jurassic Park, life finds a way.
All right, works for me.
Yeah. Um, Stormrosesky, Storm, what game to still come out this year are you looking forward to the most?
Oh, well, jumping on the Capcom bandwagon, there is that. Because looking at it, I remember playing one of those games in the arcade, and I can't wait to be able to play it and own it instead of, dumping quarters into it. Uh, um, the Epic Mickey just caught my eye because I remember looking at it for the Wii and never played it, so I would like to get that for the PlayStation. But honestly, the one game that I am looking forward to is coming out for the Nintendo Switch, and that's the Luigi and Mario, the
Ooh,
Brotherhood.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
forgot about that one. That is on my
So,
I
list
did
to get
too.
to.
Yeah, that one looks really good.
Hmm
so I am a fan of the Mario platformers, and I look forward to getting frustrated and loving the game at the same time.
And
So
you're a fan of the Mario RPG series, and that's what it is. It's the Mario RPG, but with platform elements.
that's going to be even more awesome. So there we go.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for that too. Like that would be within the top five of mine. Just getting a brand new one, especially when Alpha Dream did for some reason two remasters of previous Mario and Luigi games on the 3DS a year after the Switch came out, and then okay, Alpha Dream is now bankrupt and they dissolved the group. And we thought there wasn't going to be any Mario and Luigi RPG games, and we don't know who is officially developing Brotherhood, but we've heard that a couple individual developers from Alpha Dream are part of this team. So it's gonna have that Mario and Luigi feel to it, that sort of core. So it's really exciting.
That is exciting.
And Astrimedes, how about you? What game to still come out this year are you looking forward to the most?
There's a game called UFO 50 that's been in development for probably like 5 or 6 years at least at this point. Um the premise of this thing is that it's 50 individual games that have an 8-bit aesthetic and were released on sort of an imaginary console that never actually existed. That has kind of that has apparent limitations similar to the NES from how the games present. So yeah, there's also sort of like apparently like a sort of like meta story element between the games where you kind of like learn about, because the games have different release years, all like in the kind of spanning across the 80s that they list. They didn't really come out then, of course. This is all the made up kind of fiction of the game, but there's apparently like a little bit of like a hidden story about the evolution of the company as they release these games and stuff like that. But that's not really why I'm interested in it. It was from it's a few different indie devs working on it. It includes the guys that made the guy basically that made Spelunky, also the guy that made Downwell, and then I believe also single developer that made Catacomb Kids. I'm not sure if that's one of the other two same developers or not offhand, but yeah, it's been in development for a while. I remember it being released a very long time ago, and then finally getting a Steam release page at some point. And it actually comes out tomorrow as of this recording, actually, now that I noticed. But yeah, the games, the thing they say about it, and hopefully the reason it was in development this long, is that even though it's 50 games, they're not really mini games. They are actually like full-fledged, simple, but full-fledged games. And they're all sorts of kind of weird genres. It includes like versus and co-op multiplayer stuff. Like it covers a whole crazy spectrum of like existing and strange little game genres, it looks like. So that of course appeals to my sensibilities for liking weird things. So I'm interested in this UFO 50 game. Also briefly mentioned too, there's a game that I played the demo for that was released Steam Next Fest this year, Wizard of Legend 2. The first Wizard of Legend was a surprisingly fun kind of top-down 2D action. I don't know what to call it, but you pick a couple spells. You have this very like configurable build, which I also love, and a very like actiony gameplay. And it plays very different based on kind of like which spells you kind of equip on your wizard. And Wizard of Legend 2 is a kind of isometric 3D that actually essentially plays very similar to the original 2D game and looks like it kind of expands a little bit with a very similar direction of the first game, down to the spells feeling like pretty similar. So I'm also looking forward to that one. And then I will mention also there's a free expansion for Darkest Dungeon 2 coming out called Kingdom Mode that I'm also looking forward to. It's supposed to be sometime in Q4 of this year.
Wow, that's really cool. I actually haven't heard of UFO 50 at all, and as we're talking about it, I was stealing looks at the Wikipedia page and just the plethora of different genres with those games. And you're right, they're not mini games. This is not a WarioWare sort of a thing where a general WarioWare game will have like 50 of these like 5 to 30 second games. These are like full-fledged, almost NES style games. So
Yep.
for of note for us console fans, it looks like there are plans to get UFO 50 on consoles. So I'm hoping we'd hear something about like maybe on the next Nintendo Direct in like February or something that it's going to be coming to
The Switch feels like a no-brainer for a game like this. Yeah.
absolutely very cool and really good picks too. Um, Moving on to our main topic though, as I mentioned, it's the world without Super Mario Brothers. So in celebration of the 39th anniversary, because 39's a landmark number, uh, that was on, I think it was like September 13th or something like that in Japan. We're going to be talking about what the world would look like if the game hadn't ever released. So picture it. October 1985, United States of America. The video game crash of 1983 is still in place thanks to oversaturation of crappy games by the likes, and thanks to Atari, Coleco, and more. The Famicom Disk System released 2 years earlier in July, only in Japan by Nintendo. Instead of getting our equivalent, the Nintendo Entertainment System with the pack-in title of Super Mario Brothers 1, what games would we have gotten instead? And keeping in mind that it can't be Zelda or Metroid, as those released in 86 and 87 respectively. So what pack-in title would have been within an original NES without Super Mario Brothers and Nintendo trying to break in to the US market? And Astrimedes, I'm gonna pick your brain on this. Uh, what do you think on that?
So I looked at the list of release titles of the NES. So I limited myself to just launch titles basically that were available. So to me, maybe the most logical choice seems like the game Excite Bike possibly maybe would have made sense as a pack-in title instead of Mario. I feel like it was a very I played Excite Bike a lot. It seems like it's a pretty potentially appealing to a Western audience. Crazy guy riding a motorcycle around and hurting himself. So that seems up our alley as a Western audience. Also, possibly, even though it almost feels counterintuitive, given that we're thinking in terms of how do they break into the Western market. Even at this point in the 80s, like, ninja stuff and everything was very popular. This isn't exactly ninja, but, the game Kung Fu feels like that could have been appealing to a Western audience. And Kung Fu was also interesting in a lot of ways in terms of having side-scrolling levels and stuff that went pretty far. And I think you might even like change directions back and forth in that one. But Kung Fu also seems potentially appealing to a Western audience. And I think this doesn't count because I believe there was a certain pack of the Nintendo that did come with this, but Gyromite and Rob the robot, potentially maybe that just would have been the default Nintendo console package. Maybe the idea is price it a little higher, make it more of a fancy technical product to appeal to Westerners possibly. But I feel like maybe the most kind of straightforward, simple answer without caveats I would probably give is Excite Bike.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I remember the Rob the Robot being one of the like pack-ins with the NES, and it helped Nintendo to differentiate themselves from like the Atari 2600 or the ColecoVision, because this isn't a video game system, this is a toy. It's in the boys section of Toys R Us. This isn't anything like that. Look, it's a toy. It's a literal toy robot that you can control through the thing. So in that way, like Gyromite itself, Rob, even like Stack Up, which is part of it, that could make sense. Jason the 13th, how about you? What games would you see Nintendo having pack-ins?
So I again, I also looked at the list, and even though in the original release dates, it's a math game, I think they could have turned it into something much better. I think Donkey Kong would have been the Nintendo mascot. There was multiple Donkey Kong arcade games before the NES came out, and they did release, like I said, it's a math game, but there's a Donkey Kong Junior math game for the NES for the year that the Nintendo came out. I think they could have just done one of the arcade games as a Nintendo game, and that could have been the big selling mascot for Nintendo. And we could have just been Donkey Kong this whole time instead of Mario games.
Yeah, so those Donkey Kong games are essentially ports and a little bit, actually not a little bit, dumbed down versions of ports, because the original arcade ones like Donkey Kong the 1981, what we got on the NES, had one less level, and they because it was very similar gameplay wise, but the arcade just kind of the arcade one for Donkey Kong Jr. kind of sounded a bit better on the arcade, but yeah, it's more so like a port than anything. Um, so
It
that
is.
being said, and Hardicus, I'm gonna ask you a little bit. I'm gonna ask you the next question here. Do you think the Donkey Kong arcade titles, or Excite Bike, or Kung Fu, or Gyromite would have been enough to attract attention to the NES, allowing it to break the video game crash of '83? Could these games have allowed Nintendo to break in without Super Mario Brothers?
I think it definitely had the potential. And Jason, I didn't even think about Well, I thought of Donkey Kong, but I didn't really consider that as an option. So that I think that's an excellent choice. Like Astrimedes, I also kind of was thinking Excite Bike, but as I was looking through the list of release games, you want to break into the Western market. What better way than to use that light gun and do a Duck Hunt, Hogan's Alley, and Wild Gunman combo?
Ooh, that would have been a cool combo. Because
Because when I originally got the Nintendo, it was Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt on the
yep,
same cartridge. So I don't see why they couldn't do either, a 2 or 3 combo on the same thing. That's my choice.
And
Guns, a surefire way to break into
yeah,
the US
that
market.
that would have
I
worked.
wasn't gonna go that far. I was just gonna
I
imply it,
was
but
thinking it. I was thinking it.
yes, I mean that's plus it's let's face it, the light gun. I mean I never really played a Coleco or anything like that, but that was a very cool uh you know new way to play rather than just a controller. You had the light gun. So I mean I definitely had a lot of fun playing Hogan's Alley when I was young, and I know I played Duck Hunt too. I never got around to Wild Gunman, but that's it was a fun and unique way to play. So I think that would have been definitely a potential for really coming into the Western audience.
Nice. Um, Jamie Ells, do you have any additional thoughts on this? Any other packing games that you could think to be with that?
I think Jason the 13th hit the nail on the head with Donkey Kong and with Hillbilly Hardicus with Dunk Hunt. As I was looking through the list, I maybe want to say like Paperboy or what was that other? Can't think of a name right now, but I have to go with Jason on the Donkey Kong because any of these games that I'm looking at, none of them are really like um catching my attention that I would want to play right away. So that's my opinion.
Gotcha. And Storm, how about you?
You know, Jason the 13th answered my question about the Donkey Kong because I was like, wasn't he around that time? If we would have had him packaged with the Duck Hunt instead of Mario Brothers, I think we'd have a lot more Donkey Kong merchandise to
Oh yeah,
instead of Mario Brothers. Because it was a cutesy thing. Back then the video game industry was at a flat line because, well, especially in America, they were starting to look at the violence in video games and whatnot. So, they had to hit the market with something that wasn't already here. So I think Donkey Kong would have just fit in fine and made good packaging for Nintendo at that time. So the only other comment I had was Excite Bike is one of my favorite courses in the Mario Kart. So that's when Astrimedes said Excite Bike, I was like, yes, it makes me miss that course. Just like jumping over the hills. But for sure, Donkey Kong I think would have helped them if there was no Donkey Kong. Then I have to agree with Hillbilly. America guns sell, unfortunately. So even back then,
oh yeah.
so it might have helped but I don't think Nintendo would be where it is today slowly on that in America. And, it would be a strange new world, but I think there'd be a lot more bananas around.
Yeah. And I'll add an addendum to what Storm was saying, because I can feel our listeners saying, "Oh, video game violence wasn't a thing in the 80s." It really was.
It was.
There was a whole we know that it really came to the forefront with games in the mid 90s like Mortal Kombat and Night Trap.
Yep.
But in the early to mid 80s, you still had awful games like Custer's Last Stand, as well as games in even in the late 70s like Death Race and some of the stuff where it really was like violence and everything. Yeah, it's super pixelated, but you really get the picture of what's being done. And Storm making excellent salient points to have family-friendly mascots, also encompassed and surrounded by superb high-level gameplay under excellent made hardware, which was the Famicom and the NES. And that's why Nintendo dominated in North America and especially Japan. But what if Donkey Kong didn't get everybody's attention? What if Murica wasn't in love with the guns like they are today, and you didn't have Duck Hunt Hogan's Alley, Wild Gunman really get that? And it was a world where the Nintendo swung and a miss in North America, and we didn't have the video game industry as we see it today. My question to you, Hardicus, first: would PC gaming have taken over and or had a higher footprint in North America?
I think eventually it would. It may not have been as fast as it was, but I think PC gaming and eventually even console gaming would come to America. I think if there's an idea out there to make money, somebody's going to figure it out. And if they see Japan going with these consoles and making money off of it, someone's going to try to do the same thing here. Uh, even in this theoretical world of Japan not working quite with America on that, the game industry here might look vastly different with different characters and consoles over the ages, but I think eventually it would definitely happen. I think PC probably would be more. Well, I mean, let's face it, PC still is, master race compared to the consoles in a lot of people's eyes. Um, I personally, I think as long as you're having fun, who cares what you're doing, what you're playing it on. But yeah, short answer, yes. I think eventually that it would, games would definitely be as big as they are now.
Yeah, because my one important thing to note is that Japan didn't never experienced the video game crash like we did in the States. The big crash of '83 never happened in Japan. They never experienced any sort of a lull. So imagining a world where consoles are still a thing in Japan, and in a lot of ways, certain things that weren't as big here in the States were big there, like the Sega Master System, the PC Engine or TurboGrafx 16, and even others like if we're skipping a couple generations, think of like the Sega Saturn. That was a dud here in the States and North America, but it was a decent seller, and I think it had 3 times as many games in Japan versus the US. So you got to think like going back to what you said, if there's a market, something's going to fill the void. And my thought is PC gaming, because that always had been a thing, even before consoles were a thing like big, because you had stuff like Zorg and text adventures and whatnot. So
An Oregon Trail.
to a lesser extent, but like those kind of games and everything, especially like I knew a number of people who had Commodore 64. So, people would just be playing on that, or would they be? Or maybe MS-DOS gaming would have been a lot bigger. So you have games like Doom or Lemmings or something like that. Um,
I'm also thinking like, that's about the time D&D started getting created, so eventually people are going to, play that. It's going to expand, and people are going to want to be like, hey, I bet you I can make some sort of game like this on my computer. Even the ideas of things like that were going to drive gaming in North America, I think.
And I think PC would have, if there was no console gaming, I would think that PC gaming would be bigger in hindsight, because what would I have been doing if I didn't have a console? We grew up with computers, so I probably would have been on the computer. Pretty much only would have been on the computer, barring older brothers and parents, taking it over or whatnot. Uh, Storm, what are your thoughts on this? If consoles weren't a thing here in the States, would you think that PC gaming would have filled the void? Would it have been bigger than it was?
If I think eventually PC gaming would have gotten a stronger foothold on everyone if PCs were, well, for gaming, if they were affordable. I mean, that is one thing that the consoles have for them. They are more affordable than, well, especially now, the PCs that you would need to do any kind of modern gaming. But especially back then when, the PC there was one in the family, that was it. It was the family computer. So having to get time to share that, well, kind of like sharing the television for consoles. Not everyone. When I grew up, we shared the TV with everything. So, having a console on it, you got limited time to what you could play. So not every family had multiple televisions then. It's a little bit more commonplace now because TVs aren't as expensive. Anyway, different tirade. I think it would have, but not, the consoles really helped, and if we're ignoring that Atari and all of that were a thing, and there were some PC games in the 80s that I absolutely loved and played, like California games, and all of that. So maybe it would have caught on a bit more because there would have been nothing else. But Hardicus had an excellent point. They would have seen another country like Japan's making money on these things. We need to get in on it. So the timeline, even if we didn't have consoles, it would not have been that long if we think about it, because America's a big capitalistic country, so if we could make money on it, we're going to make money on it. And someone would have ran with the idea of consoles. So even in the imaginary world, it's hard not to think that somebody wouldn't jump on the bandwagon to bring them here. But yeah, PCs, I think that gaming industry would have gotten a little bit bigger and more attention, and maybe, just maybe, they would have marketed it to both girls and boys, because I remember growing up and going to Toys R Us, and if you wanted video games, you went to the boys section, which is utterly ridiculous. And it's always been that way. So, maybe if they would have done a different marketing too, things would have been a little bit more different for us females on the end of the spectrum. So,
No, definitely some good points. And I'm gonna touch on what you had mentioned about, like, if another console manufacturer from Japan, or even one stateside, when would they have tried that again? But if video games never had taken off here, I'm wondering, like, what sort of impact on video games as a whole would it have been if it just remained in Japan? And just like thinking, okay, it really would just be I wonder how big the whole imports thing, like where you got somebody who travels to Japan bringing in something into the States. And like, I remember growing up, I don't know about you guys, but I don't remember seeing like any stuff or anything from Japan like the way it is now. Like,
yeah.
Jason, correct me if I'm wrong. Do you ever remember seeing any Famicom, Super Famicom stuff, any Mega Drive stuff, anything like that growing up?
Nope, I did not know that. I think when I first learned about Nintendo and the NES being a completely different system than Japan's was like when I first started going to my conventions, like in the early 2000s, and seeing booths that had all these games from across seas and seeing all the different stuff. Um, Other than that, like in stores, stuff like that, hell, barely even heard about it through anybody that I knew about across the seas stuff. It's all just what was here in the States.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy with that. Like the idea that, okay, instead of, I think we didn't get like anywhere from 100 to 200 NES games, or I guess Famicom games, and instead it would be like 1,200 or something. The idea of missing an entire console like that, I just, although, what's the whole thing? You wish you could play a game over again without the actual memory of playing it, and well,
Hmm.
that would be a way of doing it, I guess. Um,
I have a question, if you don't mind. Probably for Astrimedes the most, I think. Um, in this fictional world of, no Japanese console in America, what do you think, like, how do you think the internet would have evolved with it being a mostly PC driven kind of game console world?
I mean, sorry, you're asking if I think the internet would have evolved
Like, how do
differently
you think
with
it,
less
yeah, do you think it
focus
would be
on
different?
games or something, basically.
Yeah, like how do you think that would, because you're obviously in that kind of game developer world, so I'm just curious what you really anyone would think of how the internet would evolve if it would have evolved differently if without consoles and we were more focused on that PC, because I imagine if it was mostly PC gaming, the obviously the tech is going to have its own development cycle, but I imagine them probably pushing harder on the tech of that. And I'm just wondering if like you think the internet tech would have also kind of
Yeah, I mean,
evolved different.
so arguably in this situation where, there's no console, no Japanese console, no real pop console popularity in the US in general. So back at that time, was basically right around the time the internet was kind of starting up. I want to say like Tim Berners-Lee or whoever, some of those original guys that made the first few like big advancements. I want to say it was probably right around like 81, something like that, to 83, I think is when the first few things were sort of happening internet wise here. So, I mean, arguably, if there's no consoles, um, we could say something like, well, maybe more people are playing games on PC, and you start to see more kind of action games with more need for higher bandwidths than kind of were common at the time. It could theoretically have put more pressure on kind of both technical, like hardware advancements, and design advancements in the way information's transmitted. I think in general, I feel like in general it wouldn't have really had a big impact on the direction of the internet, because this was basically right around the time where it's still in its kind of very infancy. I mean, arguably, what we could imagine about this very early internet is that, earlier on, you'd start to see more focus on, PC games instead of console games. Online, we start to socialize those things more than popular kind of console genres. And then a lot of the other things I would blabber on at this point probably bridge into just the general, rather than just the internet implications. But I would think in general, honestly, it probably wouldn't have had a big impact on the direction of the internet. But if we are to imagine it would, you could maybe say that there would be a need for more kind of high speed transmission if there's more earlier gaming happening on a PC rather than a console.
I mean, I gotta imagine, you wouldn't have half the names, like all your base are belong to us and what you say. There's got to be like the replacements,
Yeah, I guess if it, like culturally, there's big impacts there, probably much bigger than the technical. Like if the console gaming and all of its modern day memes and traditions and stuff aren't present, the people that are playing games, I think like one of the obvious things, and this is more general, is that I think games get consumed more by only sort of computer nerds rather than kind of a more general audience. So that would mean that the overall direction of games, if it was more PC focused rather than console focused, would probably tend more towards the kind of complicated strategy type stuff and all that, things that, huge dorks like me love.
Us. It's pretty much an us thing. All of us.
We're each different brands of dorks, whatever, but that's my brand.
Yes.
Jamie Ells, any additional thoughts to add to this part of the discussion? The idea that PC gaming would sort of fill the gap with a lack of consoles here in the States.
Yeah, I can only imagine if PC gaming was more of a thing here. I think that wouldn't take off more in the late aughts when the internet is kind of becoming more popular, because I honestly haven't heard like PC. I know it's been around, but when I was a kid, I never really got into PC gaming. We never did have a computer until like 1999. And I've only heard of World of Warcraft when I was like in the 8th grade. Yeah, I just think it wouldn't take off until later on, like around today's time, considering like all like the laptop and internet games are becoming more of a thing. So, but I'm definitely glad I live in a world of consoles.
Yeah, because if anything, the console is the most approachable
Mm-hmm.
way. It's the best subsidized gaming machine that we could have or hope to have, or at least it was until a
Mm-hmm.
certain console maker decides they want to try and peddle a $700 system. But that's a conversation for next week. But for this week, again, in this sort of scenario where this imaginary sort of a Super Mario Brothers was the killer app that, thanks to its absence, Nintendo couldn't get a foothold with the NES in America. What generation do we believe Nintendo or just Japan in general would have tried again? What console generation do we think, okay, to kind of what Storm was saying, where we, nature abhors a vacuum. We are a capitalist country, and Japan sees that and knows they can make bank. And so, like, if the third generation was the NES one, and fourth is the SNES, fifth is Nintendo 64, PlayStation, so on and so forth. Um, Jason, what generation do you think Japan or Nintendo, Sega, whatever, they're going to try and come back again to the US? When do you think that would be?
Hmm. Unfortunately, I think it'd be a little bit later than probably everyone else because personally, to date myself, I didn't have like big PC or internets until mid 90s, to where then I was had access to the internet and learned about a lot more stuff. So I think if more people are like me in the basics of about mid 90s, I think they would learn more about the other systems from across seas, and we might have gotten the N64 as our first like major Nintendo system.
See, and Hardicus, I want you to correct me
Smack
on
him.
this.
Okay.
I want you got to wonder. So
I
arcades were super big,
Yes, yes.
and the first generation that could accurately emulate or receive ports of games was the fourth generation, the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive, the Super Nintendo or Super Famicom. Do you think the idea of kids playing Mortal Kombat 1 or 2 in the arcades And Japan seeing that and leveraging, oh, let's bring that home. Would that have been enough for Japan to jump and leap and go for that?
I think if they think they can make money, they're going to do it at any generation. It really doesn't matter. It's let's face it, that's kind of what drives the world is greed, especially when it comes to corporations.
But
So if they think they can win with,
besides the idea that it's a okay, by that logic, they would be attempting that every year. But like, let's
well,
say,
and I think they would.
when do you think it would? Let me rephrase. Let me rephrase. When what generation do you think it would be successful that it would actually
Mhm.
take a foothold?
I
Does
think
my
I think
argument hold water
probably
with the fourth gen?
I think it would be PlayStation 1.
So
I
you think
think
the fifth gen?
yeah, I think that would be the generation that would really take a hold because I mean everyone here knows I'm not a huge fan of the N64, but let's face it, N64 really was not a very pretty system. The games were not pretty. You know, they, in my opinion, again, just my opinion, I think they looked worse than the Super Nintendo graphics did. That whole 3D blockiness just never did it for me. Now, I know it works for a lot of people, but for me, that it definitely would have happened. So I think once you make that switch to the PlayStation 1, where you've got a new kind of, you've got CDs now instead of cartridges, and I just think that combined with the upper looking games and quality of games, I think that's where it would have gotten its biggest foothold if it hadn't prior.
And the idea that if PC gaming was still a sort of a thing and people were already having like CD-ROM to play games at that point, or that's what I would assume. Like, hey, instead of like Storm was saying, instead of having
Yeah.
to spend $800-900 on a PC, hey, here's the PS1, or not even the PS1, the PlayStation,
Yep.
and it's $150, and it plays these CDs, and guess what? It plays all these games, and all you need to do
Yeah.
is plug it into a TV.
That
That's it.
price point would have really, I think, grabbed them too, as opposed to a PC. Plus, I mean, let's face it, PCs they can have a lot of issues. So you go to the wrong website, you've got a virus, there goes your whole gaming system. I mean, obviously it's not that simple, but it had the potential to mess up your system, whereas PlayStation 1 really didn't have that kind of thing. It was plug and play, you plug it in, you put your disc in, and you're ready to go. There was no installing or anything like that.
So I have a quick question, and it's kind of for
Only if
anyone.
it's quick.
So if
You
the
have 3 seconds.
If the Nintendo flopped like it normally did, and PlayStation is
Nope,
what
that's it.
picks it
Sorry.
up, would we have seen the Sony Nintendo Entertainment System?
Yes, actually.
And would that have actually been
Yep.
a big thing and actually have gone through, and we would have had
So
our Nintendo Sony system?
so the whole story with the Nintendo Sony thing, I'm going to give the cliff notes of the cliff notes of the cliff notes
Yep.
because we don't have enough time to cover the whole
Oh
darn
no,
thing.
no, no.
So Nintendo had the Super Nintendo. Yeah, had the Super Nintendo. They wanted to have a sort of a CD attachment for it to be able to expand the games. Sony comes in as a potential partner and says, hey, we can develop this for you because they were already working on the technology and they already developed the sound chip for the Super Nintendo. So we can have you as a partner. And Nintendo says, okay, well, let's set up a partnership. So they end up announcing at one of these shows in 1994, Sony does, hey, we got a partnership with Nintendo. The next day, Nintendo says, oh, yeah, we got a partnership with Philips.
Yep,
Oh, we don't have
not
anything with
Sony.
Sony. So Sony being spurned, they decide to spin off the architecture that they had and created the PlayStation because it was called the Super Nintendo PlayStation or the Nintendo PlayStation.
Yeah.
What's not known as much is within the contractual agreements between Nintendo and Sony is Sony had essentially said, oh, by the way, any games that are going to be on the Nintendo PlayStation, we're going to own all the rights to, or the greater majority of the rights to, and we're going to be able to. we're going to be able to leverage a larger portion of the money and the profits and everything. It was not a lucrative deal with Nintendo, and Nintendo, they were ahead of the curve. They invented ghosting 20 years before it was a thing in the dating world. They ghosted Sony and had their thing with Philips because that was such a big success. So that's why I think the Sony PlayStation would have been a thing still, and especially with the fact that Super Famicom was still raging and going because there was no video game crash in Japan. So feasibly, these are Japanese companies. All the stuff is still going on.
So we may not have actually seen the Nintendo 64. We may have gotten the Nintendo Sony combo.
Well, probably not even that. It probably would have just been the Ultra 64 in Japan, and maybe we would have been lucky enough, like Hardicus was saying, to get the Sony PlayStation here in the States. And I like Hardicus's arguments there. I don't know if I 100% agree with it because of the how much attention arcades had in the States in the early to mid 90s, and the idea of wanting to play that at home. I think there would have been some sort of like foothold or attempt to get a good full foothold with that with the 4th-gen system. But if that wouldn't have made it, then yes, I think it would have been the 5th-gen. It just makes me wonder how different would a console have been to appease the American tastes, especially if PC gaming had reigned supreme this entire time. So, Astrimedes, think about that, where let's say it was the 4th or the 5th-gen, and between the 2nd-gen and 4th-gen, or the 2nd-gen and the 5th-gen, PC gaming was the big forerunner in the States. How different would have that console have been to suit American tastes, do you think?
Yeah, I mean it's hard to say. I do think there is definitely a chance that, if say more of these computer nerd game genres had become kind of at the forefront of American interests, I could even see Nintendo going as far as to, ensure they're making titles that are kind of like in those sort of genres or have flavor or elements of those genres and kind of release those. You could argue that maybe you'd see more of kind of the Super Nintendo mouse peripheral usage or something like that. Maybe they make an early RTS game on the SNES that uses the mouse, like some of the very early entries in genres like this. Well, I guess technically the 80s, I don't remember if the RTS genre actually existed then. But you potentially would have seen stuff like point and click adventure games, stuff like that. I think we're maybe starting to be a thing in like the mid late 80s, something like that, maybe. But yeah, overall, I guess I would just say I think the main difference you'd see is if they were attempting to kind of break in, especially if they had sort of failed previously. You would see them try to focus on genres that were more interesting to Americans, which I would think would have to lean into those kind of common PC genres, basically just kind of maybe more sort of strategy type stuff, things that are a little less actiony because they might be thinking, because if you look at the PC space, you'd probably see a bit less action focused stuff, possibly just because of the direction of, early games like Rogue and stuff like that, to follow up on something Hillbilly mentioned earlier, games that were like D&D. Like, indeed, this was actually going on in exactly this time period, the late 70s, early 80s. I've talked before about development of games like Rogue and NetHack and stuff like that, which were literally efforts to kind of convert many elements of like a tabletop game experience to the PC. Maybe there would have been more focus on stuff like that, maybe a little less focus on things like, JRPGs. Maybe JRPGs aren't such a thing that they bother pushing at all on Westerners, and they focus more on stuff that feels like those PC games that were popular at the time.
And it's funny you say that too, because the JRPGs were not successes. They weren't very successful in the States. When in real world, we're out of this alternate universe, going back to our real world. there's a reason why we didn't in the States didn't get 3 of the 6 Final Fantasies in the third and fourth generations. They weren't as successful. There's a number of excellent RPG games that released on the Super Famicom that the Super Nintendo never got. And it's exactly as you said. And so you imagine a world where even now, these JRPGs really didn't get that as big of a foothold until, of course, Final Fantasy VII on the 5th gen. So it would really be a thing where the Western RPG would have reigned supreme in this alternate universe. But my next question I'm going to ask, I'm going to focus on Jamie Owls and Storm, and we're going to kind of get in the weeds a little bit of how the world would be without Mario and the implications of that essentially being a potential NES failure and what it would be like if we never got successful consoles up until 4th gen or 5th gen. The idea, going back to Mario itself, if Super Mario Brothers never was a thing, think about how that would be for that genre. There's no question we've seen a number of mascot platformers inspired by Mario. With of course, the immediate one that comes to mind is Sonic the Hedgehog. Without Mario, you do not have Sonic. So, Jamie, I'll ask this of you: what impact on platformers overall does a lack of Super Mario have? And would they have even been a thing without Mario?
I don't think it'll be such a thing because I think Mario is actually the starter point for all these other platforming games. When you think about it, I mean, would they be able to come up with Sonic the Hedgehog after Mario? Or if Mario never existed, it's very possible, but I think it was Mario that really started the ideas of these other companies coming up with their own platform games and their own um characters like Mega Man, Samus. Like it gave off like a whole bunch of ideas. I think the world would be very boring if Mario never existed.
Yeah, I definitely got something there. And especially Sonic was literally created to be a competitor to Mario. And he was meant to be everything that Mario wasn't. So, because of blue is different than red, and Sonic is cool and fast, and Mario is hokey and slow and this and that. So, even that being said, with
Mario can
Sonic being,
swim,
oh, what was it?
and Mario can swim.
Yes, Mario can swim.
Mhm.
Even with Sonic being meant to be the antithesis of Mario, without a world of without Mario, you don't have Sonic. And I don't know, I don't know if that's a world we want to live in. Because I love Mario games, but I also quite enjoy a number of Sonic ones.
You wouldn't
Storm,
know they existed.
right? Well, you can't miss what you didn't know.
Right.
Exactly.
Storm, again, kind of same question, impact on platformers overall, a lack of Super Mario has on the genre, and could they have even been a thing without Mario?
Without, you know, could you imagine a world without the Super Mario Super Show? No. Or like the first Super Mario movie all the way back in the 90s. It's just,
This is
Didn't
the
that
bigger
wait?
question.
yeah.
But Bob
Didn't Dennis
Hoskins
Hopper
really
win
have such a
an Emmy
career.
for that?
Did Dennis, no, I don't know. It was Bob Hoskins, not Dennis Hopper.
Yeah, Dennis Hopper. He played King Koopa.
He played King Koopa.
Did he really?
Yeah.
Well,
He
yes, he
did.
did. Never mind. Oh, anyway,
It made both of their careers.
It did.
yes,
That's what
it
I'm
really
saying. Without
did.
that movie, would those guys ever have a career? I mean, come on.
No, not at all.
Name one movie Bob Hoskins was in.
Or
Yeah, you
John
can't. You can't.
Leguizamo.
You couldn't do it. So Super Mario Brothers.
Who,
That was it. That
yeah,
was it.
just we'll ignore Who Framed Roger Rabbit, you know.
But you don't have Who Framed Roger Rabbit without Mario. So without Mario, you don't have.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit came before the Mario
I
movie.
know. I
Anyway,
know.
I'll get back to it.
Actually, no, it
Um,
didn't. Who Framed Roger Rabbit was 87. Super Mario Brothers was 85. And
the movie,
yep, yeah, exactly. And Super Mario Brothers
1993.
was before.
I'm
Super.
missing how Mario
Oh
Brothers has
God.
anything to do with Who Framed Roger
It has
Rabbit.
everything to do with
Bob
Who Framed Roger
Hoskins.
Rabbit. You remember
It's Bob
me,
Hoskins.
Eddie? Okay, Storm.
Okay, all
Please
right.
continue. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Um, I know how we ended up here. It's my fault.
No, it's not. It's
I
not.
bl I blame
See what you started.
Astrimedes. Yeah, and I'm just gonna blame Astrimedes.
I'll accept the blame.
All right. Right. You know, the world without Mario, I don't know because the first thing I'm thinking of is like the Lion King video game, and there are certain parts of that where you have to jump and do things.
Yep.
And would the world have any idea, like if no one ever came up with the idea to do Mario, would those type of games have even gotten launched off? I don't know. I
I, I would
maybe
have to guess
eventually.
yes.
Eventually they would have by then, maybe, because that's a different, but
Would Pac-Man have replaced as the main one? Because there was Pac-Land with that was
no,
an arcade platformer.
So,
no. I love Pac-Man. Pac-Man is great as its original, you're chasing
yep.
ghost and
Uh-huh.
eating pellets. All of the offshoots
But
and other variations of Pac-Man I've not liked at all. Outside of Pac-Man and Mrs. Pac-Man, I don't think it would have been strong enough to lead the charge. What I do think of is Donkey Kong. I don't know how much Donkey Kong would have evolved to get us anything if Mario wasn't there, because if he was the sole focus, then maybe he would have gotten down off those ladders a little bit sooner and
Right.
had more adventures to play,
Yeah,
So
we might have gotten a really crappy version of Donkey Kong Country before Donkey Kong Country.
yes,
although
yeah.
with maybe this speaks to Nintendo's ingenuity, where instead of Mario, they could have had a Donkey Kong platformer that would have been fun and would have been its own unique sort of thing, and they would have released it in 1987 or 1988 or something like that. Or like you
Hmm.
said, Jason, where maybe it's something where it would look crappy, but honestly, look at the Game Boy versions of Donkey Kong Country, the Donkey Kong Land series. Honestly, for those being on the Game Boy, they look pretty darn good.
Yeah.
I'm joking about the movies and stuff because obviously we could exist without, if Mario didn't exist, maybe not having those movies and stuff. The other games, though, without Mario, there'd be no Mario Kart. There'd
Yeah.
maybe
Yep.
no Mario Tennis, no,
No
like
Yoshi.
super, no
No Yoshi.
Yoshi,
Yep.
no, no Princess Peach, no Super. Would there be Super Smash Brothers? Because no
Ooh.
Mario. So like all of those that I just absolutely love. That's a to think of no Mario outside. Like honestly, I could go days and months without playing Odyssey, but the other ones, I I'd like to play once in a while. So I can't imagine a world without Mario Kart.
And the so much inspiration has come from Mario games and Mario Kart. Think of
Mhm.
all the clones. We've talked about all the clones
Yes,
on previous podcast episodes. Mario parties, again, same thing.
yes.
Mario 64, for example. Hardicus was shitting on the Nintendo 64 quite a bit, and he's got a point. He's got a point, but you're not going to have so much of the ingenuity of the 3D platformers. I mean, you won't have stuff like a Hat in Time or anything like that, where it's an indie 3D platformer. I would venture a guess you wouldn't have the Spyro series without what Mario 64 did. And I aging myself because I can't think of when the first Crash Bandicoot game came out, and I think that came out before Mario 64. I think I could be wrong on that because Mario 64 is 96. Um, but yeah, so without Mario, Super Mario Brothers 1, you could have the potential failure to launch of the video games industry in North America, where they never got out of um It never got out of the video game crash. And maybe it wouldn't have been a thing. Maybe it would have been until the fourth generation because the arcades, or more likely what Hardicus said, where they would have made it into the fifth generation with a cheaper, more subsidized console that exists solely on the TV. Either way, 5 out of 6 of us here are really glad that Super Mario Brothers 1 released, and we have it, and definitely something that really, I can't believe it's been 39 years. God, I'm old.
The number.
Oh, but
You are old.
yeah.
We leveled up.
Yeah. I'm 44 levels. Woohoo!
Oh. On that note, a huge shout out to our fantastic cast and crew as we celebrate the 39th anniversary of Super Mario Brothers 1. Any parting shots before we
Crash
call it?
Bandicoot came out in 1996.
Oh, so there you go.
Well,
96.
one
Same year as
thing I want
Mario
to say
64.
is we may not have ever had Doom on PC because one of the thoughts behind making Commander Keen by the kind
Oh,
of then
that's right.
pre-ID software was to replicate console side-scrolling,
Because that wasn't a
smooth
thing before that.
side-scrolling. Right. So if there was never that inspiration, does ID games, whatever, exist? Do they make Doom? Do first-person shooters
Oh.
exist as a genre?
Oh,
Oh
that
man.
hurts.
Oh wow.
That freaking hurts.
That's a
And,
great parting shot there,
and,
Astrimedes. Thank you.
and most importantly, John Romero wouldn't have made us his bitch without Daikatana. That wouldn't have been a thing.
Yep. More important than Doom, the game everyone remembers, Daikatana.
Yes, exactly. Any other parting shots?
I think we eventually would have gotten all the genres, just they wouldn't be the characters we know today. That somebody
Yeah.
would have invented that genre. Sonic would have happened, but it wouldn't have been forced to happen because of competing with Mario. We would have gotten that type of game just with different characters, and it would have eventually happened. Just like first person shooters would eventually happen, just not for the reasons they happened.
Yeah, and his name would have been Needle Mouse instead of Sonic. Oh, all righty. So thank you guys again for joining us, and especially thank you, our fantastic audience. We appreciate you checking in, and make sure you check us out at this time again next week for another episode of the Inferno Cast. Bye.